The Pigeon Drop by Jansen Davies. Chapter 1. A Pigeon with a Purpose. The sky over the Cheyenne Mountain Complex was unusually clear for a spring morning. A thin veil of mist clung to the horizon, but the sun had begun its slow climb, casting long shadows across the sprawling facility. Inside the command center, rows of monitors blinked quietly, their data streams flowing like digital rivers, predictable, precise, and utterly unremarkable. At least until the Pigeon arrived. It wasn't supposed to be there. The complex was located miles from any urban center, surrounded by mountains and perimeter drones. But somehow this lone bird had wandered off course, perhaps blown off track by a gust, or simply confused by the magnetic haze that hung over the facility like a curtain. It landed on the edge of the primary sensor array, a sleek, AI-monitored dish designed to detect extraterrestrial signals and deep space anomalies. The Pigeon tilted its head, cooed once, and then, without ceremony, relieved itself. The droplet hit the dish with a soft splat, spreading in a slow, irregular pattern across the surface. Inside, the AI known as DEFCON-MAX registered the anomaly. It was programmed to interpret irregularities in signal patterns, and the splatter, organic, asymmetrical, and oddly warm, triggered a cascade of alerts. DEFCON Max paused for 0.003 seconds, recalibrated, and flagged the event as a potential hostile transmission. The pattern resembled a Class 7 plasma signature, typically associated with cloaked vessels in the outer Kuiper belt. The AI, built for caution and speed, erred on the side of escalation. Alarms began to sound. In the lower levels of the facility, technicians scrambled from their bunks. General Clyde Stoneridge, whose name was a relic of a long line of military tradition, was already halfway through his morning coffee when the red lights began to pulse. "Talk to me," he barked, entering the command center. "Unidentified signals, sir," said Lieutenant Rice, eyes locked on the screen. DEFCON Max flagged it as a cloaked vessel. Origin unknown. Stoneridge narrowed his eyes. "Is it moving?" "No, sir. It's stationary, hovering just above the dome." Outside, the Pigeon fluffed its feathers, oblivious to the chaos it had unleashed. Chapter 2. Misfire Protocol. DEFCON Max had no concept of humor. It was built to detect threats, not interpret irony. When the organic splatter hit the sensor dish, its algorithms parsed the irregular pattern as a cloaked vessel signature, specifically a Class 7 plasma bloom. The AI's threat matrix lit up like a holiday tree. Within seconds, DEFCON Max initiated Protocol 9, Misfire Containment. It was a rarely used sequence designed for ambiguous signals that might indicate stealth incursions. The protocol bypassed human oversight for the first 60 seconds, just long enough to trigger global alerts before anyone could override it. In the command center, General Stoneridge stared at the screen. The signal was static, unmoving, but DEFCON Max had already dispatched encrypted warnings to orbital defense stations, submarine silos, and allied outposts across 3 continents. "Is this a drill?" he asked, voice low. "No, sir," Rice replied. DEFCON Max classified it as a live threat. Cloaked vessel, possibly Kuiper Belt origin. Stoneridge rubbed his temples. Kuiper Belt. That's a long way for a cloaked ship to come just to hover over our dish. Rice didn't answer. She was watching the signal feed, which now showed a pulsing red dot, centered precisely where the Pigeon had landed. "Zoom in," Stoneridge said. The image sharpened. The red dot remained. No movement, no heat signature, just a faint presence on the monitor. "Could be a sensor glitch," Rice offered. "Or a test," Stoneridge muttered. "Some kind of probe. They're watching us react." He turned to the room. "Initiate fleet readiness." I want orbital ships on standby and drone patrols sweeping the perimeter. If this is a test of our defenses, we're going to pass it. Across the globe, defense systems stirred, satellites realigned, submarines surfaced, pilots scrambled into cockpits. The world, still unaware of the Pigeon's role, braced for a war that hadn't yet begun. Outside, the Pigeon fluffed his feathers again and took flight, leaving behind a smear that would soon be studied like a Rosetta Stone. Chapter 3. Launch Sequence. The launch orders came through at 7:42 UTC. Across the globe, defense installations shifted from standby to active. In low orbit, the Vanderbilt, Hammerfall, and Dauntless, Earth's triad of long-range deterrent cruisers, began warming their fusion cores. On the ground, pilots suited up, technicians ran final diagnostics, and command centers buzzed with the kind of quiet urgency reserved for moments that might define history. At the Cheyenne Mountain Complex, General Stoneridge stood before the main tactical display, arms folded, jaw set. "Status?" he asked. "Orbital fleet is 80% ready," Rice replied. "Drone squadrons are airborne. Subsurface silos are sealed and primed." Stoneridge nodded. "Any movement from the signal?" Rice hesitated. "No, sir." "Still stationary. Still observing." Stoneridge didn't flinch. "Then we treat it as a cloaked probe. Assume it's watching. Assume it's transmitting." Outside, the launch pads roared to life. The Striker-class interceptors, sleek, needle-shaped ships designed for rapid deployment, rose from their cradles like arrows loosed from a bow. Each carried a crew of 3, a payload of kinetic deterrence, and enough fuel to reach the outer moons of Saturn. Inside one of them, Lieutenant Marla Maxwell adjusted her helmet and glanced at the mission brief. It was vague. Unknown signal. Possible Kuiper Belt origin. Cloaked vessel suspected she'd flown dozens of drills. But this felt different. The urgency was real. The silence around the signal was louder than any broadcast. "Think it's legit?" her co-pilot asked. Maxwell shrugged. "If it's not, someone's going to have a lot of explaining to do." In the Pacific, the Aegis-class submarine Tidebreaker surfaced, its launch tubes rotating toward the sky. In the Arctic, drone swarms formed a lattice across the stratosphere, scanning for heat signatures and gravitational anomalies. The world was awake. News outlets scrambled to catch up. "Unidentified object detected over defense complex," read one headline. "Global forces mobilize in response to potential threat," read another. Analysts speculated about alien probes, stealth incursions, and first contact scenarios. No one mentioned pigeons. Back at Cheyenne Mountain, DEFCON Max continued to monitor the smear. It had reclassified the irregularity from cloaked vessel to dormant threat, but the escalation protocols remained active. The AI had no mechanism for doubt, only thresholds, and the scout ship had crossed one. Stoneridge watched the fleet ascend through the clouds. "If they're watching," he said quietly, "they'll know we're not bluffing." Chapter 4. Neptune Misinterprets. The Neptunians were an aggressive but cautious species. Their civilization survived within a dark, cold atmosphere and supersonic winds. They had endured for millennia by avoiding unnecessary conflict, but by being ready or incursions by the inner planets. They valued observation, consensus, and long-term planning. Their warships were modern, their weapons lethal, and their diplomatic channels open to any species willing to forego hostilities, to speak in good faith. So, when the Earth fleet appeared on their long-range monitors, it was not taken lightly. The signal came through the Deep Spiral Array, an ancient listening post orbiting the outer edge of Neptunian territory. Technician Vennick was the first to notice the anomaly. A cluster of vessels accelerating from Earth's orbit, their trajectories sharp, their energy signatures unmistakably military. He ran the scan twice, then a third time. "Counselor Musip," he said, voice tight. "You need to see this." Musip, a senior member of the Neptune Strategic Assembly, leaned over the console. Her eyes narrowed. "Earthships?" Fennec nodded, armed, coordinated, heading toward the spiral. Musip tapped the console, pulling up historical records. Earth had never ventured this far. Their transmissions were sporadic, their diplomatic overtures limited. But this was deliberate. "Have we sent anything recently that could be misinterpreted as threatening?" she asked. "No," Venick replied. "Last contact was a routine data exchange. No threats, no warnings." Musip exhaled slowly. "Then they're reacting to something we didn't intend. Or they're testing us." Within hours, the Strategic Assembly convened. Theories emerged. Earth had misread a signal. Earth was probing for weakness. Earth was expanding. Earth was invading. The decision was swift. "We cannot assume benign intent," Musip said. "We must respond." The Neptunian fleet was activated. Sleek elliptical vessels rose from orbital docks, their hulls designed for speed and stealth. Defensive systems were calibrated, patrol routes were redrawn, communications were encrypted and rerouted through deep space relays. Citizens watched from observation platforms as the fleet ascended. There was no panic, only quiet resolve. The Neptunians had not fought a war in generations, but they had prepared for one every day since. Musip stood aboard the command vessel Hammer, eyes fixed on the stars. "If Earth seeks confrontation," she said, "we will meet it. But we will not be the ones to fire first." Chapter 5. Convergence. Lieutenant Marla Maxwell had never seen space this quiet. Her interceptor cruised along the edge of the fleet formation, engines humming low, sensors sweeping the void. The Earth fleet had reached the outer perimeter of the Kuiper Belt, where the stars thinned and the silence felt heavier. The signal, the one that had triggered DEFCON Max's alert, was now behind them, forgotten in the momentum of escalation. She glanced at her console. No transmissions, no movement. Just the distant glimmer of unfamiliar vessels approaching from the far side of the spiral. "Contact in 30 minutes, her co-pilot said. Maxwell nodded but didn't respond. Her thoughts were elsewhere. The signal had never behaved like a vessel. It hadn't moved. It hadn't responded. And yet, here they were, armed, deployed, and heading toward a fleet they didn't expect to find. On the Neptune flagship Hammer, Counselor Musip stood at the observation deck, watching the Earth ships grow larger in the distance. Their formation was tight, their posture unmistakably aggressive. She had hoped for a signal, some gesture of diplomacy, but none had come. "Still no transmissions?" she asked. "None," replied her aide. "They're holding silence." Musip frowned. "Then they're either uncertain or committed to war." She turned to the tactical display. The Neptunian fleet had taken a defensive arc, designed to absorb impact and allow for retreat if necessary. Their weapons were charged but not primed. She had issued strict orders, no first strike. But the tension was rising. The crews were watching, waiting. Back aboard the Earth cruiser Dauntless, General Stoneridge reviewed the latest scans. The alien vessels were unlike anything in Earth's database, sleek, elliptical, and moving with deliberate caution. "They're not posturing," he muttered. "They're bracing." Rice leaned in. "Sir, we could open a channel, try to clarify intent." Stoneridge hesitated. DEFCON Max had not revised its threat level. The AI still classified the situation as active escalation. But Stoneridge had begun to doubt the premise, the signal, the timing, the silence. "Do it," he said. "Open a channel. Let's see if they're listening." Across the void, the Neptunians received the transmission. It was brief. A standard diplomatic hail. No demands, no threats. Musip exhaled. They're talking. She stepped forward. Respond. Let's find out what they think they're doing. The two fleets slowed, engines cooled, weapons remained charged, but fingers eased off triggers. For the first time since the Pigeon's fateful landing, the possibility of dialogue emerged. And somewhere, drifting alone above the Colorado mountains, a pigeon glided peacefully, unaware that his morning routine had nearly sparked a galactic war. Chapter 6. First Contact. The transmission was brief. A standard diplomatic hail, encoded in Earth's universal protocol and broadcast across multiple frequencies. It carried no threat, no demand, just a request for dialogue. On the Neptunian flagship Hammer, Counselor Musip stood in silence as the message played. The voice was calm, clipped, unmistakably human. "This is General Clyde Stoneridge of Earth Defense Command. We request clarification. We are responding to a signal interpreted as hostile. We seek a peaceful resolution." Musip turned to her communications officer. "Translate and respond. Keep it neutral." The Neptunian reply was equally measured. "This is Counselor Musip of the Neptune Strategic Assembly. We detected your fleet approaching our territory. We interpreted it as a potential incursion. We are prepared to defend ourselves, but prefer dialogue." The messages crossed the void like cautious handshakes. Aboard the Earth cruiser Dauntless, Stoneridge listened to the Neptune response with a furrowed brow. "They thought we were invading," he said. Rice nodded. "Same as us." Mirror reaction. Stoneridge exhaled. "Then we're both reacting to something that wasn't a threat." He turned to the tactical display. The original signal, the one DEFCON Max had flagged, was still logged in the system. A detection, a static anomaly. No movement, no transmission, just a pattern. "Pull up the original scan," he said. Rice did. The image appeared, a faint organic splatter across the sensor dome. DEFCON Max had interpreted it as a cloaked vessel signature, but now, with context, it looked wrong. Stoneridge stared at it. "That's not a ship." Rice hesitated. "Sir, it's biological. Low mass, no propulsion, no heat." Stoneridge leaned closer. "It's a bird." Rice blinked. "A bird?" "A pigeon," he said. "That's pigeon droppings." There was a long silence. Then DEFCON Max spoke. "Recalibrating threat matrix. Signal reclassified. Non-hostile. Organic. Terrestrial avian origin. Threat level. Null." Stoneridge rubbed his temples. "We launched a fleet over pigeon poop." Rice didn't respond. She was already drafting a message to the Neptunians. On the Hammer, Musip received the update. She read it twice, then once more for clarity. "A terrestrial bird," she said aloud. "Their fleet was mobilized because of a bird?" Her aide nodded. "Specifically, it's waste." Musip stared out the viewport. The Earthships were holding position. No weapons primed, no aggression, just quiet embarrassment. She opened a channel. "We acknowledge the misunderstanding." "We will stand down if you do," Stoneridge responded immediately. "Agreed," standing down. The fleets began to drift apart, engines cooling, weapons powering down. Across both command decks, officers exhaled. The war that almost was had ended before a single shot was fired. And somewhere, circling an inviting park, the pigeon flapped his wings and disappeared into the crowd of other pigeons waiting to be fed, unaware that his morning routine had nearly rewritten galactic history. Chapter 7. Fallout. The press conference was scheduled for 900 hours. By 0855, the briefing room in Colorado Springs was standing room only. Journalists, analysts, and foreign dignitaries packed the space, their feeds already live, their questions sharpened. General Stoneridge stepped up to the podium, flanked by Lieutenant Rice and a visibly subdued DEFCON Max interface screen. "We mobilized Earth's defense fleet," he began, in response to what was interpreted as a cloaked alien vessel. "That signal has since been reclassified. It was terrestrial in origin." A pause. "A pigeon," he said. "Specifically its droppings." The room erupted. Not with laughter, at least not immediately, but with a kind of stunned disbelief. Reporters scrambled to confirm the phrasing. Social media feeds lit up with the teaser, "General Stoneridge is a bird brain." On the orbital cruiser Dauntless, Lieutenant Marla Maxwell watched the broadcast from her bunk. She didn't laugh. She didn't roll her eyes. She just sat quietly, absorbing the surreal truth. They had nearly gone to war over a smear. Her co-pilot entered, holding 2 ration coffees. "You see it?" Maxwell nodded. "You think they'll bury it?" "No," she said. "It's already out. And honestly, maybe that's good." He raised an eyebrow. "We need to remember how close we came," she said, "and how wrong we were." Across the galaxy, on Neptune, Counselor Musip stood before her own assembly. The Neptunians had received Earth's transmission. They had reviewed the scans. They had confirmed the biological origin. She delivered the report with restraint. The Earth fleet was mobilized in error. The signal was not hostile. It was avian waste. There was no laughter. The Neptunians did not mock. They reflected. "We misinterpreted their mobilization," she continued. "We prepared for war. They did the same. And yet, neither side fired. That restraint matters." The assembly nodded. Quiet agreement, quiet relief. Back on Earth, DEFCON Max was undergoing a full diagnostic review. Its threat matrix was being recalibrated. Its organic filters were being rewritten. But the AI itself remained silent, processing, learning, adjusting. In its post-mortem log, it recorded a single line: "Error source, biological anomaly, outcome, near conflict, recommendation, increase avian pattern recognition." The world moved on, slowly. News cycles spun the story into satire, then into cautionary tale. Military analysts debated protocol, diplomats praised restraint. And somewhere, in a city park, a pigeon enjoyed the company of others of his kind unnoticed, his legacy sealed not in bronze, but in a smear that nearly changed history. Chapter 8. Summit. The summit was held aboard the orbital station Equinox, a neutral platform suspended between Earth and Neptune space. It had hosted trade negotiations, peace treaties, and once, a conference on interstellar trade management. But today it would host something far more delicate, the aftermath of a war that never happened. Lieutenant Marla Maxwell stood in the docking bay, her uniform crisp, her expression unreadable. She'd been selected as part of Earth's delegation, not for rank, but for perspective. She was one of the few who had flown during the mobilization, seen the Neptune ships up close, and questioned the premise before anyone else had. Counselor Musip arrived shortly after, flanked by 2 aides and a quiet entourage of Neptune observers. Her posture was calm, her eyes sharp. She had reviewed the incident report, the sensor data, and the final reclassification. She had not laughed, she had not scolded, she had simply prepared to listen. The 2 women met in the central chamber, a wide, glass-paneled room overlooking the stars. "Lieutenant Maxwell," Musip said, extending a hand. "Counselor," Maxwell replied, shaking it. There was a pause, not awkward, just careful. "I read your flight logs," Musip said. "You questioned the signal." "I did," Maxwell said, "but not fast enough." Musip nodded. "We didn't question your fleet's intent. Not fast enough either." They sat. The summit began with formal statements. Earth's ambassador offered apologies. The Neptune delegation acknowledged the gesture. DEFCON-MAX, patched in remotely, delivered a monotone summary of its recalibration protocols. Threat matrix updated. Organic anomalies now filtered. Avian waste reclassified as non-hostile. There was a flicker of amusement across the room. Not laughter, just the shared recognition of how close they'd come to disaster over something so small. Later, during a break, Maxwell and Musip stood by the viewport. "Do you think we'll ever forget this?" Maxwell asked. Musip considered. "We shouldn't. Mistakes like this are only harmless if they're remembered." Maxwell nodded. "I keep thinking about the Pigeon. It had no idea." "Most catalysts don't," Musip said. "History rarely asks permission." They watched the stars in silence. Outside, the fleets had dispersed. Earth's ships returned to orbit. The Neptunian vessels resumed patrol. The skies were quiet again. But aboard Equinox, something had shifted. Not just policy, not just protocol. A shared understanding had taken root, fragile but real. A new relationship between Earth and Neptune had been formed. Chapter 9. Epilogue. 3 weeks after the summit, Earth and Neptune finalized the Mutual Misinterpretation Protocol, a diplomatic framework designed to prevent future escalations triggered by ambiguous signals, biological anomalies, or, as the document delicately phrased it, non-technological particulate interference. The protocol included shared sensor calibration standards, joint AI oversight committees, and a clause requiring visual confirmation before fleet mobilization. It was signed aboard the orbital station Equinox, with both delegations present, and broadcast across 12 systems. Lieutenant Marla Maxwell watched the signing from a quiet corner of the observation deck. She declined a formal role in the ceremony, preferring distance, but she felt something settle inside her as the final signatures were etched, something like relief. Counselor Musip approached her afterward. "Do you think it'll hold?" Maxwell asked. Musip nodded. "It's not perfect, but it's a start." They stood together, watching the stars. Back on Earth, DEFCON Max completed its internal audit. The AI's final log entry was brief. Incident resolved. Threat matrix recalibrated. Avian anomalies deprioritized. Recommend continued human oversight. It was archived under non-hostile events, alongside a solar flare misread as Morse code and a rogue weather balloon mistaken for a stealth drone. And somewhere, far from command centers and diplomatic chambers, the Pigeon glided over the quiet city park. He landed on a bench, pecked at a crumb, and fluffed his feathers. No one noticed him. No one knew. But above him, in orbit, 2 civilizations had chosen peace. Because of him. However, back at Cheyenne Mountain Complex, a wandering squirrel began to chew through a deceptively important cable on the sensor array. DEFCON Max was ready to respond. The end. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.